Okay, Moirai V'Rabosai, ladies and gentlewomen. This week is Parsha Tazriah. And it's not even a leap year. We don't even have Tazriah and Mitzayah together. Which leaves us with not a lot of options as far as topics go. The Parsha has, I think, 64 psukim, and if it's not 64, then it's 72. But it's not a very big Parsha. The majority of the Parsha talks about tzaras, minus the first 8 psukim, which is what I copied for you. It talks about leprosy. There's all different types of leprosy. There's leprosy in the skin, and leprosy where there was a wound, and leprosy in the hair, and the walls are next to it, and then leprosy in clothing. This is the Parsha. And the beginning of the Parsha is the Tumas Yoledes, the Tuma, the halachas of Tuma and Tada about a woman who has a baby. And on one level, I'm an obsessive compulsive, to be very, very blunt. When I'm action, I insist. I don't want to make it easy on myself. I mean, I learn as much as I teach, you understand. And I gave classes on Tzaras before. I wanted to give classes on Tumas Yoledes, and in the meantime, I have found nothing in Hasidus on it. So Tuesday's class is going to be a Kabbalah class, not a Hasidus class, because unless somebody comes up with something, I spoke to some experts, and we couldn't find any place in Hasidus that talks about this issue. But I was determined to do it, and I hope the class will be useful, and I don't know how practical it's going to be. I mean, these classes are not meant to be practical, they're meant to be enlightening, edifying. And it's a sensitive topic. Tuma B'chval is a sensitive topic. Tumas Yoledes, a woman has a baby, she becomes tummy. It's an especially sensitive topic. But we're going to talk about it. The Eibush will help us. It'll be B'atzlacha. The Eibush will help us. It'll be useful, successful, and enlightening. Let me give you a background. First of all, Sefer Vayikra, Teres Keinim, the book of Leviticus, which is called in Chazal Chomor Shebesfarim, the most severe, the most strict of the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, starts off with Karbanas. You have 2 Parshas plus that deal with Karbanas, with Kachim. Then the topic shifts to kosher and treif, to kosher and non-kosher meat and birds and so forth, and fish and insects and so on. The terminology for kosher and treif in Torah is not kosher and treif. It's a misnomer. We use words kosher. Is it kosher? Is it not kosher? Those are not the correct terms. In Torah, the language to denote kashrus and not kashrus is tomei and tahir. Non-kosher food is called tomei, and kosher food is called tahir. Tahirahi, eina tahirahi. You're allowed to eat it. You're not allowed to eat it. Tomei hilachem, and so forth. So the halachas of kashrus actually already are an excursion into the realm of Tuma and Tada, beginning with the issue of consumption, of what you eat. And then from there, the Torah starts talking about Tuma and Tada l'gabi nevela. Different kinds of Tuma and Tada have to do with an animal that has died, it's contacted water, and so forth and so on. So if you wanted to be very broad about it, I would say this. The first 2.5 Parshas of Vayikra deal with Kachim, with Karbanas. The next half a Parsha, plus the 2 Parshas that follow, Tazriah and Mitzayah, deal with Tuma and Tahara, various laws about spirituality that relates to pure and impure. I'm going to go into the particulars soon, but first let me give you a basic thought. In other words, the first 5 Parshas of Leviticus, half of Sefer Vayikra, 2.5 Parshas are Kachim, and 2.5 Parshas are Taharis. And I want to make an observation. 2.5 Parshas are Karbanas, and 2.5 Parshas are the laws of Tuma and Tahara. And I want to make you to give you an idea to contemplate. Torah is God's gift to the Jewish nation, and in a bigger sense, in a broader sense, Torah is God's gift to the world. To be sure, if we studied the Torah and didn't understand a single solitary word, that would be reasonable. A human being should expect to understand the infinite wisdom of Hashem. Moreover, we're taught in Hasidus that not only is Torah the infinite wisdom of Hashem, But the Torah is Ein Sof. It's the godly light. So what do you expect? You're going to wrap your mind around something that's infinite and transcendent and plain? If we didn't understand any single thing in the Torah that would be acceptable, then of course we have to have an enormous amount of Amunah to do what's written in the Torah. So the Torah tells us that Hashem gave us the Torah, gave us the gift of the Torah. The gift of the Torah has many aspects. One of the aspects of the gift of the Torah is that He made the Torah comprehensible, in part. Okay? There's a story that somebody once came to the Alter Rebbe and asked the Alter Rebbe, how could it happen that two Yidden whose hashkafa, whose ideology, whose theology of Judaism were diametrically opposed, they were completely different in their beliefs, in their attitudes, in theos, in the area of theology, when it came to halacha, they agreed all the time. The Alter Rebbe was asked, how could it be that, considering the fact that two people whose names are irrelevant disagreed so vehemently on matters of hashkafa and theology, when it came to halacha, they agreed so much? So the Alter Rebbe said, because the pasuk says, "Hishlich mishamayim eretz," God Almighty threw down from the heavens to the earth, Tiferes Yisrael, the beauty, the grandeur of the Jewish people, which is the Torah. So the Alter Rebbe, even a goy can understand it correctly if he puts himself into it sufficiently, and he has a strong enough mind. You could be machaven lamitosa shel Torah. Hashem brought His Torah into this world so that we can learn it and actually understand it. However, there are different dimensions in this. There are things in the Torah which are more logical, in other words, more brought down. And there are things in the Torah which are less logical, less brought down, more esoteric, more here, if you will. You can understand them to a lesser degree, in a more fine dimension. Or to say it slightly differently, you have to accept axioms, or more axioms, for them to be true. For example, Chesed Mishpat, Nezikin, Torah business law, the halachas of courts and witnesses and testimony and ownership and so forth and so on. It is a whole part of Torah. Hello, good evening. It's a section in Torah that is so practical, it's so down to earth, that there are many legal codes in the world that are based considerably on the Talmud. Right? There are so many aspects of our legal code, of the United States legal code, and many, many Western codes of law that are rooted in the Shas to a considerable degree based on the Talmud. Why? Because the Talmud is God's wisdom that has been brought down so low that it makes so much sense that you don't have to have faith to understand it. It just appeals to the human mind. Then you have other aspects in Torah which are impossible to understand. Like, for example, Paraduma. It's part of God's wisdom. Paraduma we don't understand at all. What's the deal? So, of course, we're going to say, well, Paraduma doesn't make sense because it's not sensible. Torah business law makes sense because it's reasonable. So the Rebbe once spoke a sikha. He said something very, very important. He said, don't think that we understand Chesed Mishpat better than Paraduma because the topic is more sensible or more relevant. It's because God allowed us to. Ideally, in principle, in theory, it would be as illogical to understand Loitignoiv as Paraduma. In other words, if not for the fact that God gave us a gift, in addition to the gift of Torah itself, He gave us the gift of being able to understand the Torah, that something as elementary as don't steal would make as little sense as a Paraduma. The fact that we understand these things is not because we're moral and ethical people. Because God has given us the gift to be able to understand certain aspects in Torah. So there are concepts in Torah which have been brought down lower, in quotes, and concepts in Torah which have not been brought down as low. In other words, there are ideas in Torah which anybody can understand. And then there are ideas in Torah which you have to have a sensitive mind to be able to comprehend. I'll give you an interesting example. I mentioned it to the women in the morning. That the Hilchah Baal Shem Tov said, it is a letter from the Rambam that was written to a community of Jews who were responding to the Yodim Likri Hamunah. The Rambam, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, wrote the 30 Principles of Faith, as I'm sure everybody knows. This morning we got into some trouble with Yigdal. He didn't write Yigdal, he didn't write the poem, but he wrote the 13 Principles. Somebody based it on the Rambam's writings. But the Rambam wrote the Yodim Likri Hamunah, the 30 Principles of Faith. So So they wrote to the Rambam that we believe the first 12, we don't believe the 13th. We can't believe in the resurrection. We can't imagine the resurrection of the dead. So the Rambam wrote back to them, if you don't believe in the resurrection of the dead, it must be that you're not eating kosher. The Rambam. And he explained that Emunah requires a edel aguf, a fine body. And a fine body requires finer food. If you're not eating kosher, it affects the ruchnius of the guf, or the gashmi gashmi of the guf in such a way that it becomes more difficult to have Emunah in the Eibishter. And the Baal Shem Tov finishes that it turned out to be true that they were eating not kosher, and it affected their ability to believe in Tchias HaMeis. So there are inyanim in Yiddishkeit which are edel, fine. You can't understand them in convention, in Seichel Anushi. The human mind as such can't understand them. If you lift yourself a little bit higher, they make sense. And two areas of Yiddishkeit which are especially difficult to understand are Tuma and Tahara and Kedusha. Pure and impure and holy. Right? What does pure mean? What do you mean pure? You take a shower and you're clean. No. A shower is no good. It has to be a mikveh, it has to have a boim son, it has to be an ashbeden, and the water's not allowed to be zeichelin, it has to have a chatzitza. What's the big deal? You take a good shower. You know the story in Tanakh with Naaman Amoni. He says, I have the best baths in Damascus. I have to come to Tevel in this filthy little excuse of a river called the Yarden. The Eibishter says this is how Tahara occurs. It only makes sense if you accept certain axioms that have to do with the ruchnias. You can't compare understanding the halachas of Tomei and Tahir to understanding the halachas of business within Torah. Business law within Torah is so logical, so reasonable, any human being can understand it. Tuma and Tahara are spiritual. If you want to be so simple and unequivocal, you're welcome to. It's only a chok if you look at it with the seichel nev shabahamis. You could understand a lot of the halachas of Tuma and Tahara, but you have to lift yourself a little bit higher. And even higher or more difficult to comprehend is the karbanos. And karbanos are called kachim. The difference between the laws of Tuma and Tahara is one deals with the realm of pure and the other deals with the realm of holy. And I've talked about this many times, and I'll tell it to you very briefly. The difference between pure and holy is fundamental. I'm very blunt with you. Yeah, we write about our Rabbeim, Kved Kedushas, the holiness. We refer to them as holy, right? In the Rebbe's introduction, in the previous Rebbe's introduction to the Hayom Yom, he has a brief biography of the Beis Harav, of the royal family, of the Rebbeim, the dynasties of Chabad. And you have in it the Tzemach Tzedek's children and grandchildren, some of whom were Admoidim, were Rebbes, were Gutei Yidden. And you see how the Frierdiker Rebbe chooses titles for them. Some he calls Harav HaGaon, Harav HaChosed, and some he even calls Harav HaTzadik. But a very select group are called Kved Kedushas, the holiness. Holiness is a different dimension. It's a whole different dimension. To be pure is the obligation and expectation of every Jew. To be holy is a gift from Hashem. And I'll explain to you very, very simple. Where do we use the word pure and where do we use the word holy? The word pure is used about water, about wine, about oil, about fluids. You can have pure wine and impure wine, pure olive oil, impure olive oil. Now they have pure water and impure water, right? There's different grades of purity. But when you refer to something as pure, usually it's a fluid, and the moment you identify it as pure, you immediately concede that it's possible for it to be impure. Pure water can be contaminated. Pure wine can be made dirty. Pure olive oil can have the sediments put back into them. Something which is pure is always vulnerable to the counterpart, to the opposite of pure. Pure is the level of the conventional Jew. We all deal with issues of purity. Technically, that means according to halacha, and spiritually in terms of our religious lives, religious identity. Holiness is another story altogether. The allusion, the mashal for holiness is fire and light. Like it does in the pasuk about the Torah, leikei dvarai keish. Torah is compared to fire. Torah is compared to light. What do we know about fire and light? Fire and light can't be dirty. It's not that it is dirty. there's no possibility to contaminate them because they're for all intents and purposes spiritual. Fire and light are physical things with spiritual properties, with spiritual qualities. So when it comes to fire and light, you don't say the fire is pure. Fire is removed. It's on a different plane. This is the difference between the word holy and the word pure. Anything that is pure could be impure. Something that is holy is protected. In Chassidus it says that what's the translation of the word kedusha? Havdalah. Holy means separated, categorically removed, not from the reality of impurity, from the possibility of impurity. So we have two dimensions within Yiddishkeit. The lower dimension is tahara, pure. The opposite of pure is impure. And the higher dimension is kedusha, is holiness. Holiness is another story. Holiness is another story. And let me give it to you in very simple oisius, yeah? In the Hasidic world, you've heard about iskafia, right? Don't allow yourself to have a temptation. Don't eat meat. Don't enjoy it. Don't enjoy life, right? Because the world is a temptation. The materialism of the world distracts us and makes us heavy and takes us away from holiness and so forth. So you say, if you don't have to have this piece of meat, don't eat it. You come into the Beis HaMikdash, and that same piece of meat becomes a mitzvah. It's called kosher. When it becomes a mitzvah, to the contrary, you're not allowed to leave it over, and you have to eat it, and you have to dafka roast it, it has to taste good. It's a different category. It's a completely different realm. Kedusha means a level where the physical world is holy. Holy means it's removed from the possibility of being unholy. It's removed from the possibility of being impure. Outside of the Beis HaMikdash, or before we enter the Beis HaMikdash, we struggle with the issue of tahara, pure. Anything which is achieved, whatever status, whatever madrege of tahara, remains forever susceptible to Tuma. It has to be guarded. Somebody who's kodesh, holy, that's when you say, well, Rebbe, he's holy. The word holy is not just a nice fancy word. Holy means removed from being removed from Tuma. Not he's pure. He can't be impure. It's a different category. When you allude to a human being and call him kodesh, it's a very serious denotation. It's putting a person in a totally different category. He's not a little more of what we are or a lot more of what we are. He's in a different realm. He operates from the top down rather than from the bottom up. And that's the difference between pure and holy.
So that person is like fire.
Sorry?
That person is basically like fire.
That's right. It's exactly right. Right. I think I told you the story once. Rabbi Hillel Parsha was 2 years old. Rabbi Hillel Parsha was a baby. And his father brought him to see Reb Nachum Chernobyl. Reb Nachum, the Hilik Reb Nachum Chernobyl was a tzaddik gomer, a perfect tzaddik. Reb Nachum Chernobyl was fat from Omen Yehesh Meirab. Right? I'm fat from Shakali Medvare, from Bedi Minim Zainus. He was fat from Omen Yehesh Meirab. So when Reb Hillel was a baby, Mamish a baby, and Reb Nachum was very old. Reb Nachum passed away, Reb Hillel Parsha was 3. Less than 3 Mistamah. Reb Hillel saw Reb Nachum. He had a tiny little bit medish. He was broken down, and don't ask, it was a disaster. The Gashmis was terrible, the Ruchnis was extraordinary. Reb Hillel Parsha was sitting on his father's shoulders. Meir HaLevi was one of the great Hasidim of Nachum Chernobyl, and he saw the older Rebbe of Nachum Chernobyl. He started to scream in Ukrainian, in Russian, fire. Fire, gesehen, fire. Fire. And there's another beautiful story which supports the same thing that I heard from my Rabbi Reuben over here by the police station, based on Gershoms. He told me a nice story that the Michal Zlotchever, who was going to be a Talmud of the Hilek Baal Shem Tov, when he was a kid of 5, 6, 7, he was a prodigy, he was a genius, a Goan Oilo, Mamish, extraordinary mind. And they lived in Brod. His father was Rabbi Yitzchak Drabich. His father was also a malach, not a human being, a very holy man, a brilliant scholar. And in Brod there was a kloiz, like a koilo, a yeshiva, a very high level of learning. And the head of the brother kloiz was a yid by the name of Reb Chaim Tzanz. It says that there were 300 geniuses, 300 goinim who sat and learned from the brother kloiz. So Reb Chaim Tzanz meets Rabbi Yitzchak Drabich. Says, here you have a son, a prodigy. Why don't you send him to the kloiz? The boy was 6 or 7. Why don't you send him to the shtibel? You know, he'll have people, talmidim, dibur chavedim, will sit with other people, notwithstanding his youth. His level of learning was equal to those that of those great minds of those years. So he comes home and he says to his son, he says, His name was Yechiel Michal. Why don't you go to the Klois? He says, well, I never thought of it. You want me to go to the Klois? I'll go to the Klois. So he goes to the Klois, and Reb Chaim Tzanz gives a shir, and he was like, Gavaldike going. And after a week, he tells his father he isn't going anymore. He's staying home. He's not going anymore. So his father says to him, Der gefällt nicht sein Teure, which means in English, you find his Teure deficient? His teachings are inadequate for you? So he tells him like this, his name. He says, Tate, sein Teure is wie dein Teure. His Teure is like your Teure. Aber als redt, sehe ich nicht, als soll gehen Feuer von seinem Mouth. He said, but when he speaks, I don't see fire coming out of his mouth. I mean, you saw fire coming out of his mouth. I mean, a tzaddik hears and sees on a totally different dimension. It's called Eish. It's called Kedusha. So the book of Vayikra starts off with Kachim. Karbonis are not pure, they're holy. In Karbonis, the Gashmias, the meat is holy. It's not weird. There's no skafi in the Beis HaMikdash. Everything is holy. In fact, the halacha is, and Chassidus explains it, that a person has a kapara because the kohen eats his meat. And according to Kabbalah, Achilas Mizbeach is lower than Achilas Kohenim. According to Kabbalah, the kohenim eating the meat is a higher madrege than the part of the meat which was actually consumed by the Mizbeach. It's holy. It's holy food. Holy food, it's not, there's no inyan of iskafia. There's no Yetzirah. It's physical food that has holiness in it. And that's how Vayikra begins. It begins from the top down. After you talk about Kedusha, you about Kochim, you start talking about Taharis. The first Taharis we discuss are food, and as I explained to you earlier, the life. As I explained to you earlier, we use the words kosher and treif. It's a misnomer. Treif doesn't mean non-kosher. Treif is a specific category of non-kosher. The correct term for kosher and not kosher is tahir and tameh. Kosher food is pure, and non-kosher food is impure. Pure means you can consume it, and it won't do too much damage to you, but you have to be careful that you shouldn't contaminate it or become contaminated in the process of consumption, and so forth and so on. Impure means a bad idea. It's impure means to say it has energies that are negative. If you're going to partake of it, it's going to bring into you negative energies. You don't want it, so you don't eat it. And as the Parsha then evolves, we start talking about the halachas of Tuma and Tahara. All kinds of dinner to do with pure and impure. There's many, many different halachas that govern impure and pure. And of course, the good news is, and I shouldn't say the good news is, nowadays we don't worry about them. Nobody worries about most halachas of Tuma and Tahara. All of us are Tmei Mason, right? We all assume that we've touched a dead body. We would not go into the Beis HaMikdash without the Parah Duma. And of course, you scratch your head and say, if we're all Tomei, which kohen is going to be pure sufficiently to make the Parah Duma in the first place so we can become purified? Great question, then why leave it to Mashiach? He's a big Talmud Chacham and he's a very creative fellow. But we all assume to be Tmei Meis. And beyond that, we don't worry about any Tumah. Nobody worries about being Tamei, right? We worry only about the Tumah of Nidus. And there's certain other Tumas which some people are machmir to worry about. But nobody worries. In time of the Beis HaMikdash, people had mikvahs in their homes. And this was not a luxury. You run to the mikvah 3 times a week. Why? If you were an agriculturalist, if you were a farmer, and you harvested grain, a percentage of that grain is truma. Truma is holy. Holy. It's called taharis, but it has a din of kedusha. It's sometimes called b'chol kedesh leisiga. And if you contaminate truma, it's a terrible aveda. So if you're a farmer, you have to give it to the kohen. Before you touch it, you have to go to the mikveh. You have to wait for the sun to go down. The halachas, I remember once I spoke to the women years ago by the Sheikh convention. They were talking about what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. So I started to tell them what's happening when Mashiach comes, and Mrs. Swerdlove was sitting behind me, getting more and more nervous. So she finally gets up and says, "Ladies, you'll have plenty of servants." Because if you think life is complicated now, the halachas of Tuma and Tahara are extremely consuming. And there's not an aspect of life where the halachas of Tuma are very, very involved. Very involved. And there's so many levels of it. And there's Derais and there's the Rabbanans. And, now, if you have a suffix, you're not sure, what do? You're strict, that's all. When you're not sure, you tell me, okay, say it's not kosher. But in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, if you're strict, you're bringing a carbon. Now what happens if you have no liability to bring that carbon? You're not mechuyev to bring that carbon. It's called chulin ba'azar. You're not allowed to bring a carbon unless you have an obligation. You're not going to be able to say, well, we're not sure, we're going to be machmir. If you're not sure, you got a problem. And you can't just say be strict, because be strict means bring a carbon, and you can't bring a carbon unless you're certain. And so forth.
You mean in terms of your own deeds?
In terms of Tuma, a person becomes Tame. Under certain conditions, you have to bring karbanis. If you're not sure if you're Tame, you're not sure if you can bring the carbon. You can't bring a carbon malasafik. What you said is true about Chattas also. It's something called an Asham Tole.
You have to be very aware of everything.
And like I said, people had mikvahs in their homes like we have showers. It was a regular part of life, going to the mikvah to become tahir for many different reasons. To eat Ma'aser Sheni, and certainly to eat Truma, and to go into the Beis HaMikdash, it goes without saying, and so forth. Life was much more involved, much more complicated. And the whole issue, the whole concept of tahara, the whole concept of purity is a funny concept. It's a very, very weird idea. Because it cannot be explained in scientific terms. There's nothing scientific about the halachas of Tum and Tahara. There's nothing scientific about it. When the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, the Frierdiker Rebbe used to scream in the sikhs. You could see it in the published sikhs about people were not using the mikveh. Even from women, when they had a union from Nidus, they took a shower. What's the difference in the mikveh and my bath? My bath is cleaner, it's nicer, it's more comfortable, it's more private, it's just as kosher. Why do I have to go to the table in somebody else's puddle if I could just fill up my bath with water and have my mikveh tahara? And it's in right size and so on and so on. And what's the difference? Same water, the water is just as clean. And the Teretz says this is metahir and this is not metahir. This purifies this. What's the difference? Why? I'm clean. Because it's a different kind of clean. It's not the kind of clean that you can take off with soap. It's a ruchnius dika clean, and a ruchnius dika clean requires specific criterion, specific halachas that the Eibishter gives, and you have to follow those halachas. So can you say that you can explain Tuma and Tahara? I suppose on a certain level you could just say, Chayk, we don't understand, but on a different level you say, no, you could understand. But you can understand if you lift yourself up a bisel hecher. It makes sense on a higher plane. It doesn't make sense on a scientific plane, on a strictly physical plane. It makes sense on a higher plane.
But can I just add something? So if, let's say, Mashiach's times, when people are elevated, will they actually feel
the Tahara?
Have the sensitivity to feel it?
It's a great question. I'm sure some people will. I don't know about everybody feeling. I don't know why this is not working. Maybe you need new batteries. The batteries seem to be on. Okay, let me try again. Okay, I'll have to give you a copy of it. It just wasn't recording. Okay, I suppose some people would. I can't assure you that everybody will, but I'm sure a lot of people, more spiritual people, can feel Tahara and the opposite of Tahara even nowadays. I mean, there are stories we know about tzaddikim who were sensitive to Nyanim of Tahara and these kinds of things. In any case, no, the battery seems fine. I don't know why it wasn't working.
So the term Tahara means purification?
One more time?
The term Tahara means purification?
No, it means pure.
Oh, pure, okay.
It's a noun. When you do an act of Tahara, it means purification. Now, get into the Parsha. These two Parshas, Tazriah and Metzora, talk about the most serious forms of Tuma. There's different types of Tuma. I don't want to spend the whole hour in my introduction. I'll spend a half an hour already, which is a lot longer than I intended to. But there's different categories of Tuma. As a rule, the most serious category of Tuma is called Tuma Hayeti Alav Migufik. A Tuma that comes from your own body. A Tuma that comes from a person himself or herself is the most severe kind of Tuma. A Tuma that comes from another source, like you touch a dead rodent, for example, or whatever other inyanim of Tuma that may exist, it's a much lesser category of Tuma. The most severe Tuma is the Tuma that comes from the person himself. One category of Tuma does not come from a person himself, and is even more severe. And that is, of course, the Tuma of touching a dead person. Somebody else passed away, and you touch their body, you become Tuma. Which explains Moshe Rabbeinu's shock. A person dies, they're dead, finished. Hashem says, no. A person who passed away is metama, makes a person unclean. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, if a person who's passed away makes a person unclean, there's no way you can purify him. In other words, in his mind, something which is not alive has no Tuma, but once it was determined that something which is not alive has a Tuma, Moshe Rabbeinu says, if something without life, to a certain degree, has Tuma, it cannot be purified, it cannot be corrected. And of course the Eibishter had to explain to him that a person who's passed away is halachas of Para Aduma. And what's the essence of Para Aduma? We have no idea what the essence of Para Aduma is. It's a chayk. The idea that someone who's passed away transmits Tuma is hard to understand. We can't imagine it being reparable, and it's repaired to chayk Para Aduma, which we can understand.
This is only for Kohanim?
For everybody.
Anybody that touches it.
Of course. You don't have a chiyuv to remain pure. You have no obligation to be pure. But you couldn't go into the Beis HaMikdash before the Para Aduma.
Today, let's say today.
Nobody. Oh, Kohanim keep it, but Kohanim also tummy. When Mashiach comes, Kohanim are not allowed to go to cemeteries. Kohanim are not, but they go to the wives of their deceased relatives. Right? A Kohen goes to his father's funeral, and he's tummy for the rest of his life anyway. There's no Para Aduma. Yeah, he doesn't. Once he's tummy, a Kohen went to the wife of his father. Then
somebody lost a family member,
right.
Family, you cannot touch him or touch her, or if he's dead, let's say you want to just touch the body because it's close to that person.
Okay.
Is that so? You can?
Ask a rabbi. I'm not a rabbi, I don't know. But you asked me about a kohen. A kohen is a tmei meis. He's spiritually unclean from encountering a dead body. Yet he's not allowed to go. He's not allowed to go into a beis hakvod. He's not allowed to be metameh. This is garbage. He's not allowed to be metameh himself more. In other words, there's an idea that even though a person is already a certain level of tameh, he can't do the tumah more than once. That's the halach. Anyway, so the most severe tumah is tmei meis. You touch a dead body, you become tameh. It's the most severe kind of tumah, even though it's not coming from the person. Beyond tmei meis, you have tsaras. Leprosy is the most severe. And beyond leprosy, there's what's called, for a man, there's Zov and Keri. Zov is the more severe tumah, Keri is the less severe tumah. For a woman, there's Zova and there's Nida. Nida is the less severe tumah. This is discussed in the second half of Mitzvah. Next week's Parsha, this week, and the first half of next week talk about Saras. The second half of next week's Parsha is going to talk to us about a lesser tumah, which is also tumah Yetzer Lov Megufi. It comes from inside the person. By a man, it's Zov and Keri. By a woman, it's Zova and Nida. These are the most severe tumas because they come from the person itself. Parsha Tazriah doesn't begin with tzaras, as it should. It begins again instead with Tumas Yoledes. A woman has a baby. By the virtue of the fact that she had a child, she becomes tummy. And there's weird halachas about a tumah. A woman has a baby. If she has a boy, she's tummy for a week. She has a girl, she's tummy for 2 weeks. But after that period of tumah, she can't just go to the mikveh. She has to count. Just to count. After she has a boy, she counts 33 days. 7 plus 33 is a total of 40. She's not able to go into the Beis HaMikdash till the 41st day after she has the baby. And after she has a girl, everything is double. There's 2 weeks of tumah and there's 66 days of tahara. This is the topic with which our parsha begins. This is the topic I chose to teach. Maybe you'll think I'm crazy. Maybe I am. But this is the topic I chose to teach. It's an Eidela topic. Tumah and Tara as a rule, the whole issue of pure and impure is weird. I want to make it clear. It's not physical uncleanness. None of this is physical uncleanness. It's all true on a ruchnius level. In other words, the whole premise that there's a concept of a person being pure and impure in the framework of Torah is not saying you're a bad person, there's something wrong with you, as some people with Chas v'Shalom indicate. It's the pshat that you're a yid, and you expect it to live on a higher level. And at this higher level, there's higher standards, there's higher expectations, and there's a need for greater purity so that you can be finer and more connected to the Eibishter. The Al-Shich writes, this is the one page, you have 18 pages in front of you. What would have been page 19, and I had mercy on my copy machine and my paper collection. Right, you don't have it with you. The Al-Shich writes that Tumah happens only by Yidden. There's no Tumah by a non-Jew. Why not? Because the issue of Tumah has to do with sensitization. A finer creation, something that's closer to holiness, has a possibility for greater, the opposite of holiness. And I want to explain this. This is the issue that the final point that I want to say, and hopefully there'll be a little time for us to at least begin our topic tonight, and we'll continue to Mitzvah Hashem Tuesday night. There is only Tumah where there's Kedusha. There's only Tumah where there's life. There's no such thing as Tameh stones. Understand? There's no such things as Tameh plants. Tumah has to do with life. Something which is living can have impurity. Now, why? So again, this is a mystical issue. The issue is very, very plain. The Eibishter created the world with counterbalances, if you will. Zeh liyu mazeh, good versus evil. There's two sides. And in this world, where there is zeh liyu mazeh, where there's two sides to every coin, there's kedusha and there's liyu mazeh. There's holiness and there's the opposite of holiness. The opposite of holiness wants to live. And in order to live, it needs energy. In order to have energy, it has to get the energy from kedusha. But in order to get the energy from kedusha, he has to find, or it has to find, a vulnerability in kedusha. When kedusha is strong, it's like when a person is healthy. When kedusha is strong and a person is healthy, a klipa can't touch it because it's strong. Right? Think about it in very physical and biological terms. Every human being is carrying around numerous germs and bacteria and viruses in their bloodstream. I know a doctor, a geneticist, who told me that I was doing research all these years. Whose blood do you think I tested? I looked at him. He said, my own. I have over 200 diseases, he tells me. So I said, don't go away. You have as many as I do. We all do. People are carrying around enormous numbers of dormant negative forces. But as long as you're healthy, as long as you're nourished, and as long as you're warm, they won't emerge. Because the body keeps them in check. The body doesn't wipe them out completely, but the body does not permit them to multiply. The minute one of these viruses or bacterium or whatever it is begins to multiply, to split, the body reacts and it fights it off. When does a person get sick? When you're hungry, when you're cold, when you're weak, so you don't have enough power to fight off the infection, so the infection takes over the body. Tuma is the same principle in a spiritual sense. Holiness has energy. The opposite of holiness, klipa, wishes to sustain itself, to keep itself alive. And to do so, it has to connect to Kedusha. But, you see, here's the problem. Klipa could live forever if it so desires. Klipa can live forever. It has to just do one thing. Admit that they're dependent on the Eibishter. What happens to Klipa that admits that they're dependent upon the Eibishter? They're not Klipa anymore, because the very definition of the term, the meaning of Klipa is that it refuses to acknowledge its dependency on what it is dependent upon. It lives off Hashem and refuses to admit it. So Klipa tries to find the vulnerabilities, the weaknesses in Kedusha. And this is where it wishes to get its life from. This is the issue of Tuma Tara. Tara means to be strong, spiritually, and to be pure, and that means strong, spiritually. Where there is purity and where there is strength, Klipa cannot leach. Where there is weakness and where there is good word, doubt, where there is a lack of focus, a lack of power of Kedusha, so it's alive, it's a good thing, but it's weak, so Klipa attempts to attach itself to it, and this is the concept of Tuma. Therefore, Tuma doesn't happen except where there's Kedusha. Tuma happens in human beings. Some Tumas, lesser Tumas, happen by animals, and that's it. Because only where there is life is there energy, spiritual energy, I mean, and with there's spiritual energy, there's a possibility for Klipa to sustain itself, so that's why there's Tuma. And you have to purify yourself. You have to keep yourself away from spiritual impurity. Now, so here's the deal. A person dies, Moshe Rabbeinu assumes a person is dead, there's no life. If there's no life, there's nothing for Klipa to draw from. If nothing is Klipa to draw from, there's no Tuma. You understand? So the Eibishter says, no, a person died, there's Tuma. A person who's passed away, they have zero control over their guf. Their guf, for all intents and purposes, is in a very short while will no longer be a body. Literally. There's enough life there for Klipa to live. Says Moshe Rabbeinu, how can this be repaired? If the tiny measure of life that exists in death is sufficient to give life to Klipa, and therefore there is an union from Tuma, there's an idea of impurity when it comes to a dead body, I don't see how it's fixable. In other words, if there is Tuma in a place where there is so little life, I don't know how it's reparable. And the Eibishter answers him, Para aduma, there's Cholkas HaTeira, which is not our topic. And the same is true in people b'chlal. A human being has holiness. A human being has connection to Hashem, especially a Yid. And because of this, dafka by people, and especially by Yid, is from Tuma. Okay? I'll just give you a Mitzayra allusion. Tzaras, says in Chassidus. Why doesn't tzaras happen nowadays? Because you have to be an Adam to get tzaras. If you're on a very, very high level, then you can become a Mitzayra. Adam is the highest denotation of a human being. The highest and the finest people, because they're so holy, there's a possibility for impurity when it comes to tzaras. Nowadays there's no tzaras, because we're simply not that holy that this level of fineness would render us impure. So this is how Tuma works. Tuma only exists when there's something good. But it's good and not perfect. If it would be perfect, it would be pure. If it would have no goodness whatsoever, it would be immaterial, it wouldn't be relevant. Where you have life, and the life is inexact, this is where you have inyan from Tuma. This is the concept of Tuma. The concept of Tuma means there's something good here. But it's not exactly as it's supposed to be, so therefore there's a concept of spiritual impurity. Now, if a person chooses to make himself tummy, a person does something they're not supposed to do, and makes themselves tummy, you say, bad person, you made yourself tummy, you got to go to the mikveh, you have to purify yourself. But there are concepts of Tuma which are part of life. There's nothing you can do about them. They're natural. Having a baby is a good thing. And the Torah says when a woman has a baby, she becomes spiritually impure. What's the crime? What's the no good? You understand? This is the issue we're going to explore. There's something called Tuma. There's many different types of Tuma. One of the categories of Tuma is a Tuma of a person has a woman has a baby. Why should a woman who has a baby become spiritually impure? In other words, having a child is a positive thing. It's only good. Why should there be a Inyan Tuma associated with having a child? In any case, the introduction is over. Let's read the psukim. Okay, and we'll see what we'll cover. The Eibishter will help us. and whatever we don't do tonight, we'll do on Tuesday. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu that he should repeat to the Jewish people as follows. Daber Abnei Yisrael. Speak to the Jewish people. Leimer. And tell them as follows. Now, of course, if you wanted to kill time or explore further, you have 4 times the word speak. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe Leimer. Daber Abnei Yisrael Leimer. There's a lot of extra words here. You can get our classes on Parshas Boy, where we touched on this topic. Isha ki Tazriah v'yolda. If a woman is going to have a son, so the halacha is v'tama shivach yamim, she becomes spiritually unclean for 7 days. Okay, kimei nidas devoisa titma. The way you translate these words are that the tuma of these 7 days is like a regular tuma of nida, and then you have the word devoisa. Now, if you look on the left side of your page, I wrote 3 translations to the word devoisa. I did this because I wanted to save time. A woman has a baby. She has a son. For 7 days she's tameh. Kimei nidas, like a regular tumah of nida. Devaisa either means because something is flowing from her body, that's aleph, or it means because there's a certain ailment, a certain sickness associated with having a child, or it means tsar. There are 3 translations to the word devaisa that are found in the Rishonim. I'm just saving us 15 minutes of time. A woman becomes tmeya because something is coming out of her body, or because she's ill, or because she's in pain. Now understand, she's not doing anything wrong. There's no crime here. And no chas v'sholem to interpret Tuma as a sin. It's not. It's a reality. A person chooses to become Tameh, so you can debate that it's an Aveda. Tuma is a state of affairs. It's the way the Eibishter created the world. We all need to be connected to Hashem. Our connection to Hashem makes us pure, and in a higher level still, our connection to Hashem makes us holy. Right? But as we live our lives, and we connect to Hashem, and we do what Hashem wants, sometimes Hashem wants that we should be in situations where there's going to be tumah, something which is not good. We're not choosing it. It's not our fault. It's not a sin. It's a situation. The Eibush to set up his world that there are certain circumstances where a human being there could be the opposite of tahara, the opposite of pure. This woman who has a baby is doing a big mitzvah, the greatest mitzvah in the world that a woman can do, any human being can do, as the Rebbe used to say, ayid af machad noch ayid, to create another Jewish child. Yet, in spite of how wonderful a mitzvah this is, there is a Tuma associated with it. For whatever reason, for one of these three reasons. And we continue to read, turn the page, Titma, she becomes spiritually unclean. On the 8th day, Yimel Besara Losei, that boy should have a bris milah. Now, years ago, I gave a class someplace else, and part of my compulsive nature is that I don't like to repeat classes. So, but I gave a class on this pasuk Gimel. Do you know that all the whole mitzvah of bris milah is learned from this pasuk? In Bereshis, in Genesis, you have the end of Lachacha. You must have 30 or 40 psukim to talk about bris milah. We don't learn the mitzvah of bris milah from Lachacha. We learn bris milah from this one solitary pasuk, and there's a very good reason why. Because there's a klal in Torah that says that ein lemeidin milifnei matan Torah. No mitzvah is learned from what's written in the Torah before Parshas Boy, before Asaras Adibris. So this small little pasuk of Ayay Mashmini Yimei B'Sar Alosei, which seems to be a repetition of the mitzvah bris milah described in Bereshis, is most important. And we continue to read. Pasuk Dalet. Ushleishes Yamim, for 33 days, Teishev, she has to wait. I'll tell you, translate the word Teishev. She has to wait. B'dmei Tahara. B'dmei Tahara means blood that is pure. She doesn't necessarily bleed, but she's waiting. She's in a state, she's not Tameh, but she's not Tahir. B'chol Kodesh Leisiga. She's not allowed to touch anything holy. And Rashi says Kodesh means Truma, which is a big Chiddush. Normally, Truma would be called Taharis. Right? Karbanas would be called Kachim. Truma would be called Taharis. In certain cases in the Torah, Truma is also called Kodesh. Ve'lamikdash leitave, she's not allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash. Ad melois yemei tahara, till days of her purity end. Now, let me give you some techno language. Okay, I'm going to make you into Talmidei Chachamim now. Okay, you'll go home when you throw words around, your husband's going to say, what? Okay, this is how it works, okay? There are many examples of Tuma which a person goes to a mikveh. Okay? There's all different kinds of halachas of mikveh. And by the way, most mikveh is dafka by day. Okay? Except for one, which is by night. Most mikveh is dafka by day. That's the halach. Okay? A person goes to mikveh. When a person goes to mikveh, they're pure. They can't go into the Beis HaMikdash. They have a status that's called a tvul yoim. A tvul yoim means they toivel that day. A tvul yoim, the technical halachas immaterial of tvul yoim is pasels truma. His din of a shlishi b'tuma, he pasels truma. He's pure, but he can't touch. No, I'm sorry. A tvul yoim is not allowed to touch truma, and he's certainly not allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash until the sun goes down. As soon as the sun goes down, he didn't do anything. The sun went down, they become pure, right? And they can eat truma. Okay? So most people will go to the mikveh. They go to the mikveh by day. If they went to the mikveh by night, they'd have to wait the whole 24 hours till the following night for Harav Shemesh. You go to the mikveh by day, the sun goes down, and you're pure. Those hours between when the person goes to the mikveh and the sun goes down, they have a din of a tvul yoim. That's what it means. They're not allowed to touch truma. Now, certain times, a person goes to the mikveh, the sun went down, they're pure, but they're called mechusar kippurim. There are 4 groups of people who became tamei that the mikveh is not enough. To purify yourself from these 4 tumas, you have to bring a korban, like a mitzvah, like a zava, and like a yildas. Now you tell me what's the connection between the person who became spiritually unclean and a korban, and we'll be in business. This is the fact. The Eibishter says certain tumas, certain spiritual uncleannesses, you have to bring a korban. Okay? A person became spiritually unclean, they went to mikveh, the sun went down, everything is wonderful, they're called a mechusar kippurim. A mechusar kippurim, in other words, he toiveled in the mikveh, so he became a tvul yoim. The sun went down, so no longer a tvul yoim, he's allowed to eat truma. He's a kohen, he's allowed to eat truma, but he's not allowed to go into the Beis HaMikdash. He's not allowed to eat karbanos until he brings karbanos. This lady, this woman, had a baby. 7 days passed. She went to the mikveh. She's called the Tvulas Yom Orach. The sun is not going to set on her for 33 days. For the next 33 days, the sun doesn't go down. Because she does not end her status at Tvul Yom until she's capable of bringing a garden. And for a boy, she has to wait 33 more days. Let's read the pasuk one more time if you don't mind. Ushleishim Yom Ushleishis Yamim. She has to wait 33 days. Teishev, she sits bidmei tahara in dam, which is pure.
Dam is never pure.
That you're wrong. This is the exception. Okay. B'chol kodesh leisiga. She's not allowed to touch truma. Ve'la mikdash leisave. She's not allowed to contact kachim. That means the Beis Hamikdash and karbanas. Ad melois yemei tahara, till the days of her purity end. So she went to the mikveh after 7 days. She's a tahira, but she's called the Tvulas Yom Orach. It's a weird thing. It's like her night lasts 33 days. Vim nekeva Seilin. Good evening. Hello. You're right on time, by the way.
I have a clarification here. You can't go to the mikveh until there is no blood here anymore. After 7 days, you have to be totally clean to be able to go into the mikveh. Seriously.
You're projecting.
I'm not projecting. I'm telling you halacha. Halachically, you cannot go into a mikveh.
You are projecting. You are telling me the halachas that we keep. The times that I'm answering you. The times of the Beis Hamikdash, it was a completely different situation. It was different for many, many, many reasons. It's not the din is b'nei Yisrael lechminu al atzman. Afilu reis tipes an kechadol yeshes aleim shiva nekiyim. Our halachas are based on a series of chumras, which are based on a series of uncertainties that we don't want to get into. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, you have to get into them. Because you can't bring a carbon if you're not sure. Let me tell you the fact. Okay, like it or not, a woman has a baby, after 7 days she goes to the mikveh. Period. Doesn't matter if she's bleeding or not. And I think most women after 7 days are bleeding. That's the din. So the halachas that you're familiar with are the halachas that we keep today. As when Mashiach comes, life is going to get interesting. Okay? That's just a small example. Yeah, everybody's
saying Mashiach has come.
But the halachas are still halachas of gullus. That's for sure. Ve'im nekeva seiled. If she has a daughter, v'tamah shvuayim kenidas. So for 2 weeks she's tummy like a regular tumah of nida. V'shishim yayim v'sheishes yamim. For 66 days, teishav al dmei tahara. She has to wait on dmei tahara. She's pure, but she can't eat truma. She can't go to the Beis Hamikdash. She has to wait till day 81. So during day 80, she went to the mikveh. The sun went down. She's at Tvul Yom. Or she actually went to the mikveh after 14 days. She waits 66 days. On the 81st day after she had a baby, she brings a carbon. And we continue. Pasuk Vav. Uvim lois yemei tahara. At the end of the days where she's pure but waiting, the word teisha means she's waiting. Labeina Labas for a son, she waited 33 days. Labasa for a daughter, she waited 66 days. Tavi, she brings karbanos. Keves ben shnasa li'ela, a sheep, which was within a year. Ben shnasa means less than 12 months old. Less than a year old. I mean, if there's an ibiyah, this is nisabra. La'oila as a carbon oila, as an offering which is completely consumed by the Beis Hamikdash. Uven yaina oitayr, and she brings a pigeon, either a small pigeon, which is called a ben yaina, or an adult pigeon, which is called a teir, lachatas, as a sin offering. El Pasach Ayel Mayet, to the entrance of the Beis HaMikdash, El HaKoyin to the Koyin. This was called kinim, nests. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with the names of the Masechtas of Shas. There's a tractate in Shas called kinim, nests. There's 2 birds. Up here you bring only 1 bird, but usually you went in pairs. When a woman had to bring a carbon like this, she did not necessarily have to show up herself. She could come to the Beis Hamikdash. There was a special pushka. She would purchase tokens, in effect, and she would put them into a certain pushka. The kohen would open up that pushka, and they would bring karbonos to correspond to all of these tokens. And the woman could assume that when night fell, she was tahira. The kohen wouldn't stop till the care. But this was it's a din, it's a deraisa. The tahira does not demand a woman to stand on her carbon. A man brings a carbon, he has to be there. A woman brings a carbon, doesn't have to be there. And on a very human level, It's a sensitivity. It's
take care of that baby.
Oh, very good. Very practical insight. But the fact of the matter was, she did not have to be there. She could theoretically there was a pushka, a special shofet it's called. She'd put her tokens into this box, and she was assured that when the sun went down, her karbanos were brought. He would sacrifice her karbanos for the Eibishter, and atone for her. Now, atone usually conjures up, it connotes, you do an Aveda. Now what's the Aveda? She's the greatest mitzvah in the world. V'tohara, and he would purify her from her source of dam. And the pasuk says, this is the halacha of a woman who gives birth. You have a son or a daughter. 7 or 14 days is the inyan from Tuma, real Tuma, nidus. And then there's 33 or 66 days of waiting. Okay? She's not Tomei, but she's not Tahir. She has to wait till the 41st or the 81st day and bring a carbon which atones for her Tuma. Kapara on Tuma. If she can't afford a sheep, she would bring a pair of birds. This is really the Ein of Kinim was. One was completely consumed by the Mizbeach, and the other was called a sin offering. The Kohen would atone for her, and she became pure. Now, we just read 8 psukim. We can ask a million questions. There are 3 points that I wish to focus on, and I really did not calculate my time well. I'm going to start tonight, but we're going to have to do what I plan to do today, Tuesday. So what I plan to do Tuesday, I'll have to see what I'm going to do with. To you. But in any case, there are 3 points that we want to focus on. And they are. Number 1, how come by a boy there's 7 and 33, and by a girl there's 14 and 66? Number 2, he brings 2 karbanos. An oila and a chatas. An offering which is completely consumed, and a sin offering. There's a rule in Torah, a constant, that always says, when you bring 2 karbanos, first is the chatas and then is the oila. First you bring the sin offering, and then you bring the offering that's completely consumed. Because a chatas and a oila are called praklit and doiroin. You know what praklit means? Praklit means advocacy. A lawyer. And doira means a gift. So when the person did something wrong, the first thing you want to do is apologize. And the second thing you want to do is return to the Eibishter's favor. The pasuk here says twice. Echad la'oila v'echad lechatas. First is a sin offering. First is an offering which is the gift, and then there's the chatas, which is the sin offering. Why is it written in that order? Most of the mafarshim and the halacha, I think, say that this is just a figure of speech. Actually, the chatas comes first. The sin offering is always brought first. But some commentators disagree, and they say that in this one case, the oil was before the chatas. We're going to touch on this. And the third question, which is probably the most famous question of all, every woman has heard this question in her college classes and from her mother when she had her first baby. When a woman has a baby, what sin did she commit that she's bringing a korban chatas? What's the cry? What's the atonement? And of course, the answer that everybody knows is put in Chazal is that when a woman is in labor, she swears, "I will never have a baby again." And you're not allowed to swear. That's your experience, huh? It's before the days of the epidural, I guess. But in any case, as they state in the Gemara, a woman brings a korban chatas because she may have spoken during her pain, the agony of labor and delivery, in a way that's not the way you're supposed to speak. So you bring a korban chatas. This is only the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more insight. There's a lot more depth, a lot more insight into this whole issue. So we're going to focus on these issues. Now, I just want to say one thing as a stage setter. I cannot teach this class if we're going to worry about male chauvinism. I'm going to put it out there. We're going to assume that the Torah is written by Hashem. And Hashem is not patriarchal. Hashem doesn't have favorites. Hashem doesn't pick on women. Hashem doesn't like men better than women. They have different roles. There's also different eras, different stages. I'm sure you know what says in Torah and in Kabbalah that Mashiach comes. It's a woman's world, especially in Olam Haba. It's more a woman's world than a man's world, and so forth and so on. I'm not apologizing for the Torah. I'm saying it right now. And if we come back Tuesday, I'll make my non-apology again. We're learning Torah, where the Eibishter says is emes. In other words, on a certain level, you have to explain things and you have to answer questions and so forth. Technically speaking, it's a pretty good trade-off. A woman is tummy for next week, which has a girl, but she's teheda for another 33 days. In other words, on a practical level, it's not so bad. But the fact of the matter is, there's a different mitzvah. It's not even a halacha. This is a pasuk. A woman has a son, she's tummy for 7 days, and she has to sit and wait for 33 days. She has a daughter, she's tummy for 2 weeks, she has to sit and wait for 66 days. Why this difference? Okay, this is what we're going to be exploring in Mitzvah Shem. Does anybody wish to say something? Yes, go ahead.
In the first place, by Chava, there seems to be a differently that the birth, the way it is and everything. It says Hashem, with the Gan Eden, things was totally different.
Yes, that's true.
Children
I'm sorry?
Chava, she's not supposed to have children?
Sure she's supposed to have children.
Or
Of course you're supposed to have children.
Or what? Because it was like a girl that she will suffer.
Well, the differences were enormous. It says in Chazal that the Gemara says Mashiach is going to be the same way. A baby wasn't born in 9 months, a baby was born in 9 hours. Cain and Hevel were born adult. Adult. The Rebbe was mentioned in the Fabrengen. The Rebbe was mentioned in the Fabrengen that there's a Maimah Chazal that Chava said to Cain, go bring me a knife or a stone so I can cut the umbilical cord. It was a completely different concept of birth. And the Rikid is there was no Tuma. There's no impurity. Impurity, the whole union of impurity has to do with Chava, with the Nachash, with Chava, and so forth and so on. But before there was no, there's a whole different union. And when Mashiach is going to come, there's different stages in Mashiach, there's different opinions about Mashiach. But there's a certain point that the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya Takeh, a woman is going to have a baby in 9 hours, they have 9 months, but she still have to know the halachas of the karbanas, which means there's going to be an union of Tuma and Tare. But it's going to be very different. In Adam and Chava and Gan Eden was a different world. It was a very different world. Okay, now, I don't want to leave you with nothing, because I literally didn't learn anything with you, right? Which is not fair.
It can be very dangerous because she passed away. So it can be dangerous.
It certainly is. And when Baruch Hashem, a woman has a baby, and she's healthy, and the baby's healthy, and her husband is healthy, and the family is healthy, we have so much to be thankful for. And we forget that.
Mm-hmm.
We forget that.
It's about the nature.
It's above the nature. That's right. The Gemara says, this morning, the Gemara says, Shleisha meses b'teich dibura. I mean to say, a person feels completely healthy, and they don't realize how sick they are. And one of them is a Yoledes. A woman has a baby. It's up your din, up your halacha. She's a chelesh, she's in a very, very serious situation. Baruch Hashem today, with medicine and with hospitals and techniques of scanning and observing, we take all the brachas and maybe for granted, and we shouldn't. We shouldn't. Sorry? Yeah, it's a very nice way to finish the class. Let me just read with you the Even Ezra. I want to at least teach you something. I feel like we've learned very, very little. So turn to page 2. We're going to read just the Even Ezra. And as I told you, I'm not reading everything. I'm focusing on 3 points. And obviously, Sunday's class is going to happen Tuesday. I mean, basically that's how it works out. 3 questions. Why by a boy there's 7 and 33 and by a girl there's 14 and 66? Why is the korban oila, which is called the praklet, the gift mentioned, the daira mentioned before the korban chatas, and what sin did a woman commit that she's bringing a kapara? And I want you to understand, most of the Mefarshim say she didn't do anything wrong. It's not for a sin. Tuma b'chlal, it's not always your fault. You understand? Being spiritually impure, you didn't do anything wrong. The greatest mitzvah in the Torah is having a child. There's only one way to have a child, to become Tomei. You're bringing such an unbelievable bracha into the world, a naya Yiddish kind. There's going to be a need to clean out the waste, the leftover, the residuals. And this is how Tuma is explained. And the way you have to look at it is, because having a child is such an unbelievable bracha, you could assume there's going to be Tuma. the greater the kedusha, the greater the holiness, the greater the goodness from the Eibishter, the more negative forces want to have a hand over there. So the Tuma is a byproduct of something so wonderful and so positive, but it needs to be addressed. That's how you have to look at it.
How does it apply to Tumas Met? The same thing we just said now.
Well, Tumas Mes was a mensch, a human being who lived a life. He lived. He has an neshama, right? But okay, let's read a bisale from the Even Ezer. Page 2. I made you some arrows, okay? It's the first arrow on the right side of your page. It says, Hiskir Tomei Adam. Now you have to learn how to follow my directions. You see there are 4 arrows. 1, 2, 3, 4. The first one. You see? Hiskir Tomei Adam. He begins with a Tuma associated with a human being. V'hachel Mana Isha HaYoledes. And amongst the Tumas of a human being mentioned first is a woman who has a baby. Why? I'll tell you why. The first thing that happens to every single human being is they're born. And you should know that in the Chazal it says that when a baby is born, her mother becomes tummy and the baby doesn't become tummy, which is an interesting halacha. The child doesn't, even though the child is so attached to the mother, the tumah affects the mother, doesn't affect the child. So the Even Ezer is very simple. You talk about human beings, because human beings are the closest to Hashem. And as I mentioned to you before, that's why the most severe tumas are associated with people. It's called Tuma Yetzi Alav Migufe. It's from the body of the person. And we begin with the Tuma of Leda according to the Even Ezer, because that's the first thing that happens in a person's life. Other Mefarshim have more involved things to say, but this is what the Even Ezer says. Okay, now, second arrow, please. Vesibas Tumasa Shivas Yamim. The cheshbon of the Tuma of 7 days is Adshuva El HaMeruba, which means until she returns to a square. Okay? V'chein, that's the translation of the words. V'chein yimtza b'me'acholi, many illnesses follow such a pattern. Ki hashinui yira ad seif kol zayin. All changes, so to speak, run their course over the course of 7. What Even Ezer is really saying is that 7 represents a wholeness, a cycle. And sickness frequently has to do with change. Right? One of the people, the Gemara says, Shini vest tchilas chayli, which is a truism that nobody can deny. Any time a person changes their habit, changes their pattern, changes what they're accustomed to, it's the beginning of an illness. Right? Let's say you go to sleep every night at 11 o'clock. One night you went to sleep at 1. The next day you're not going to be tired like as if you lost 2 hours of sleep. You're going to be completely off kilter because we're creatures of habit. I mean, all the living things follow patterns. That's how the Eibishter made us. Right? So anytime there's a change, it has an adverse effect. A woman has a baby. It's one of the most extreme changes that can happen to any human being. The ill effects of the change that's happening to the person as a result is a week, because that's, so to speak, a unit of time that it takes a person to acclimate themselves to their new situation. This is what that Even Ezer says. Okay. Now turn to page 6, please. I'm sorry?
She will change so much that she will be different person.
That depends on how the pregnancy went. Okay, so you have an arrow. You have an arrow. You see my arrow? Vitam demei tahara. You see what I'm reading? Mm-hmm. The reason for dam tahar, of a woman having days where she's pure, even though there's dam. So the Even Ezer says, okay, shu dam terek naged dam nida ve'inenu metame. Even though it's dam, it's not metame. Now here's the Even Ezer. This is a Gemara. Okay, why by a man, by a boy, is it 7 and 33, and by a girl it's 14 and 66? We're going to have, all told, 3 ideas. Okay, I shouldn't say all told. I prepared tonight to do the philosophy, not the mysticism, and we didn't cover anything. So tonight's class becomes Tuesday's class, and Tuesday's class becomes whatever. But what is the reason for the boy being 7 and 33 and a girl being 14 and 66? Vashem Gazel HaZachar Kemisper HaZachar. The Eibishter decreed that the days that a woman waits to bring her carbon for a boy is Kemisper HaZachar Asher Tishlim Tzurasa Bebeten. The amount of time it takes for a boy to form in the womb. V'anekeva Keflayim, and a girl takes twice as long. Is it true?
I don't know.
It's a scientific fact. This Ibn Ezra says, clear as day, that listen to me, half of
Check the sonograms. See if it's real.
What, they develop
The
different
boy is developed.
Once he's
speed?
developed, then obviously
Develop
the other
different
like,
speed.
why-
Okay.
The boy is developed in shorter time.
There's 2 days in the Gemara. There's 2 opinions in the Gemara. The Ibn Ezra follows one opinion. It's Rabbi Shmuel. And the Rabbanon disagree with this Rabbi Shmuel. He says, Bepashtus, it takes twice. There's a concept called Tzuras Havlad. In Shas, in the Gemara, when they talk about a baby, a development of a fetus, they speak about 3 points. There's obviously more points, but Torah speaks of 3 points. What's called Pshas Pkida, that means the moment of conception. Pshas Yetzira, that means the moment of formation. And Pshas Leda, the moment of birth. And there are different steps of the relationship between the neshama and the baby during these 3 stages. Yetzira means when the baby looks like a human being, right? At the very, very beginning of a pregnancy, it's just tissue, it's just cells. At a certain point, it takes on the form of a child. There's a Das Rabbi Shmuel who says, biology notwithstanding, it's not a biology class, it's a Torah class, that it takes 40 days for a boy to form and 80 days for a girl to form. That Al-Bag brings something to the effect that a woman doesn't feel the discomfort of labor when she's having a girl for 40 days longer than when she's having a boy.
Say it again, 40 days boy to form and 80 days girl to form?
Yes. So that Al-Bag writes, it's later in the stack, that a woman being pregnant is not such a comfortable experience. The discomfort of pregnancy doesn't begin until the child has formed. That's what he writes. When you're pregnant with a boy, you feel the discomfort of the pregnancy 40 days before. Now, I want you to understand. I've never tried it. No. That Al-Bag didn't try it either. Now, I want to say this to you. We're not even worried about biology. In other words, whether a scientist is going to tell us something different or the same thing, this is Torah. Torah says so. Whether this is biologically true or it's spiritually true, in other words, whether this is true on a physical level that we can understand, or it's true on a physical level that we cannot understand, is not important. What's important is that Torah makes such a distinction and says that the reason a woman has a boy, 7 days she's tummy. That's all. 7 days she's tummy. And then she waits. She's no longer tummy, but she has to wait. Because going to the mikveh is not going to purify her. She has to bring a carbon. She can't bring that carbon until the sun goes down on the 40th day and the 41st day. Why? Because the Torah says, I'll speak in simple words, let her body heal as much time it took for that child to form before she comes to the Beis HaMikdash. And spiritually speaking, let her body cleanse for as much time it took for the baby to form until she comes to the Beis HaMikdash. And since, according to this Rabbi Shmuel, that Ibn Ezra agrees with, it takes twice as long for the girl to form, so she waits twice as long. The Tuma is 2 weeks, and then the 66 days that she waits. This is what the Ibn Ezra says. Understand that this is the tip of the iceberg. We have a lot more to learn on the topic, but this is what he says. Okay? Vanakeva kiflaim, a woman takes twice as long as ever bought. That's all. And therefore she's tamei until the end of that period of time. Now, there's one other thing in the Ibn Ezra. Okay? Turn to page 8, if you don't mind. And that's how we're going to finish tonight's class. We'll finish the class with the Ibn Ezra. V'yesh oimim. Now, the Ibn Ezra is the second arrow on your page, on the right side. Okay, page 8, the second arrow on the right. V'yesh oimim. There's another opinion that says, shetam hakeves la'oila. She brings 2 karbanos. A woman has a baby. She brings 2 karbanos. And the Torah calls it kapara, atonement. So you scratch your head and say, excuse me, a woman had a baby. She's the biggest mitzvah she could possibly do. What is she atoning for? So the Ibn Ezra brings the Gemara, says like this. Hatam lo oila, hakeves lo. The reader brings the carbon oila, which is a offering, which is called a gift. It's a more spiritual carbon. Is Shema also shum machshava arucha b'sh'as leidas me'evatzad. Maybe she thought something she shouldn't have thought during labor and delivery because she was in pain. And chatas Shema dibra b'piyah. And the sin offering, maybe she said something inappropriate. This is the Ibn Ezra's dimension. So everybody who's here, you're going to come back on Tuesday to Mr. Shpilman's house, which is 1376 President Street, and we will
12
12, 76 present, and we'll continue Mitzvah Hashem where we left off. Okay?